There are relationships that make perfect sense to everyone around you. And then there are the ones that make you quietly ask yourself, why does this feel so right and so complicated at the same time? Maybe she's older than you. Maybe she's younger. Maybe the number itself doesn't bother you nearly as much as the way people look at the two of you. Or worse, the way you catch yourself looking at it when you're alone. If these conversations help you see people and yourself a little more clearly, consider subscribing. There's a good chance you'll find something here that stays with you long after the video ends. Because something interesting happens when feelings grow across an age gap. At first, you don't notice the gap at all. You notice the laugh, the calm in her voice, the way she remembers tiny details no one else seems to. Or maybe it's her curiosity, her energy, the feeling that talking to her somehow makes the world feel lighter. That's how it usually begins. Not with numbers, with moments. Then, one quiet evening, the numbers suddenly arrive. Someone makes a joke. A friend raises an eyebrow. A family member asks a question that sounds innocent, but doesn't feel innocent. And now something has changed. Not necessarily between the two of you, inside you. You start measuring things that never mattered before. Will this work 5 years from now? What will people think? Am I ignoring something important because I'm caught up in how she makes me feel? It's strange how quickly love can become a math problem. But most men don't actually fear the age gap. They fear what the age gap might reveal about them. That's a very different fear. Sometimes an older woman makes a man question whether he's accomplished enough. He isn't comparing himself to her age. He's comparing himself to the life experience he imagines she expects. He starts editing himself without realizing it. He explains his career more than necessary. He tries to sound wiser. He hides the hobbies that make him feel young. Not because she asked him to, because he's afraid she'll eventually see what he believes is missing. On the other hand, a younger partner can awaken a completely different insecurity. Some men suddenly feel pressure to become the person who already has every answer. Every decision starts carrying extra weight. They feel they have to be endlessly confident, financially secure, emotionally steady, always leading. And when they have moments of uncertainty, which every human being does, they hide them. Not because vulnerability is wrong, because they quietly worry that uncertainty might look like weakness. What makes this fascinating is that neither person may actually be expecting any of that. The pressure often comes from the story playing inside your own head. Stories are powerful, especially the ones nobody else can hear. I've watched men sit across from someone they genuinely cared about, laughing, sharing dreams, finishing each other's sentences, while secretly fighting a conversation that never left their own mind. Am I enough for this relationship? Notice how different that question is from, is this relationship enough? One question is about love, the other is about self-worth. And confusing those two can slowly change everything, even before the first real challenge appears. Because the first hidden challenge isn't the age difference at all. It's the invisible role you begin assigning yourself without even noticing. And that role has a way of following you into every conversation that comes next. The strange thing about invisible roles is that they rarely announce themselves. They just become the way you show up. A man who once laughed freely starts choosing his words more carefully. Not because anyone told him to, because somewhere along the way, he decided he had to become a version of himself that fit the relationship. Maybe you've done this without realizing it. You're sitting across from her at dinner. She's talking about a place she traveled years ago. A story from another stage of her life. You smile. You listen. But while she's speaking, another conversation is happening inside your head. I haven't experienced enough. Or perhaps it's the opposite. She's excited about plans for the future, new adventures, new dreams. You nod. Yet a quiet voice whispers, what if I'm already in a different season of life? Neither thought is proof that the relationship is wrong. They're reminders that love doesn't erase the stories we tell ourselves. It simply shines a brighter light on them. I've noticed that many people assume age gap relationships struggle because of birthdays. Often, that's not where the real tension lives. It hides inside expectations. Some are spoken, many aren't. Imagine this. You're walking through a bookstore together. She picks up a novel she loved years ago and says, "This changed the way I saw life." You read the back cover. You've never even heard of it. For a second, it's nothing. Then your mind quietly turns it into something. Maybe we're too different. But later that afternoon, the opposite happens. You introduce her to a song she's never listened to. She smiles, asks you to play it again. Now, suddenly, the differences feel exciting. What changed? Not the age gap, the meaning you attach to it. This is why two couples with the exact same age difference can experience completely different relationships. One sees every difference as evidence they don't belong together. The other treats those same differences like invitations to discover another world. That choice isn't always conscious. It's shaped by confidence, by past experiences, by whether you've learned to see differences as threats or as curiosity. Still, there is one difference that deserves more attention than people usually give it. Timing, not age. Timing. Two people can care deeply about each other and still find themselves wanting different things, not because one is older or younger, but because life is asking different questions of each of them. One may be thinking about building, the other may be thinking about protecting what they've already built. One wants to take risks, the other has learned the cost of certain risks. Neither person is wrong. They're simply standing at different emotional crossroads. And this is where many couples make a quiet mistake. They start debating the future before they truly understand each other's present. I want, you want, back and forth. But very few stop long enough to ask, what experience made you want that? That question changes conversations, because people rarely argue over dreams alone. They argue over the fears hidden underneath those dreams. A younger partner might fear missing out. An older partner might fear losing stability. Or the roles could be completely reversed. Age doesn't decide that. Life does. And when those hidden fears stay unspoken, something subtle begins to happen. You stop responding to the person in front of you and start reacting to the version of them you've created in your imagination. That's where distance quietly begins. Not during an argument, not after a disagreement, but in the silent space where assumptions slowly replace curiosity. And there's one assumption, more than any other, that has ended relationships people believed were strong enough to survive anything. That assumption is almost never spoken out loud. It hides behind ordinary conversations, behind small pauses, behind the sentence that never gets finished. You might be driving together after a good day. Nothing is wrong. The music is playing softly. She looks out the window for a moment longer than usual. You notice it. You don't ask what she's thinking. Instead, your mind quietly fills in the silence. Maybe she's realizing we're too different. She, meanwhile, might be wondering whether you're tired after work. Two completely different stories, built from the same silence. It's surprising how often relationships change because of imagined conversations rather than real ones. When an age gap exists, those imagined conversations can become even louder. A younger man may wonder if she'll eventually want someone who has lived through the same milestones she has. An older man may wonder if, years from now, she'll regret choosing him instead of someone closer to her own stage of life. Neither fear appears overnight. They grow slowly, one unnoticed thought at a time. And here's what makes them so convincing. They usually borrow pieces of reality. Yes, different generations can have different habits, different references, different priorities. But your mind has a habit of taking one true detail and building an entire future around it. She doesn't recognize a movie you grew up loving. Suddenly your thoughts leap years ahead. Will we always feel this disconnected? Or she introduces you to something from her own past that means everything to her. You don't immediately understand why it matters. For a brief second, you wonder if you're missing something much bigger than a simple story. The moment passes, but the feeling stays. This is where emotional maturity quietly enters the room, not as confidence that says, everything will work out, but as curiosity that says, tell me more. That one sentence has saved more relationships than dramatic declarations ever could. Because people don't usually need you to share every memory. They want to feel that you're willing to step into it with them. Think about the moments when you felt closest to someone. It probably wasn't because you had identical experiences. It was because they made space for yours. Age doesn't prevent that. Pride sometimes does. Fear certainly can. There are men who become so determined to prove they're mature enough that they stop being playful. Others become so determined to appear youthful that they hide the wisdom they've earned. In both cases, they slowly move away from the person they actually are. And something interesting happens. The relationship becomes heavier. Not because love disappeared, because authenticity did. Most people are drawn to someone who feels real, someone who can laugh at himself, someone who can admit, "I've never experienced that before," or "I remember going through something similar," without turning either statement into a competition. Because love isn't built by proving whose life makes more sense. It's built in those quiet moments where two people stop defending themselves long enough to truly see each other. Still, even couples who manage that often face another challenge that almost nobody prepares them for. It doesn't arrive at the beginning, when everything feels exciting. It tends to appear later, just when both people start believing they've finally figured everything out. It's a quiet shift. So quiet that many couples don't even realize it's happening until they look back months later and wonder why something feels heavier. Not worse, just different. The excitement of discovering each other begins to settle. The late-night conversations become normal. The little surprises become familiar. That's natural in almost every relationship. But when there's an age gap, this stage can bring a question neither of you expected. Who are we becoming together? Notice that it's not the same as asking, do we love each other? Love can still be there, very much so. The harder question is whether you're both allowing each other to keep growing. Imagine this. One of you starts changing careers. The other begins caring for an aging parent. Someone wants to travel more. Someone else wants a quieter home. Life keeps moving, and suddenly the age difference isn't just a number anymore. It becomes part of how each of you experiences change. Not because one person is right, not because the other is wrong, because different seasons can ask different things from us. This is where many people become frightened. They mistake change for incompatibility. They think, we weren't like this before. Of course you weren't. Neither of you is the same person you were a year ago. Healthy relationships don't stay still, they adapt, sometimes gracefully, sometimes awkwardly, and that's okay. There's another detail almost nobody talks about. The people around you may also change. Friends who were supportive at first begin asking careful questions. Family members become protective. Someone makes an offhand comment at a gathering. They probably move on from it within seconds. You don't. You replay it on the drive home. You wonder if they noticed something you missed. This is where outside opinions quietly become inside doubts. Not because those opinions are always accurate, because repeated questions have a way of planting uncertainty, even in confident people. I've seen couples spend hours defending their relationship to everyone else, while forgetting to nurture it with each other. It's exhausting. You start trying to win approval from people who aren't living your life. Meanwhile, the person beside you simply wants to know one thing. Are we still on the same team? That question matters more than most people realize. Feeling like teammates doesn't mean agreeing on everything. It means believing that when life becomes confusing, you'll turn toward each other instead of away. Sometimes that means admitting you're scared. Sometimes it means saying, I don't know what the future looks like. Those words aren't signs of weakness. They're often signs that the conversation has become honest. And honesty has a curious effect. It lowers the pressure to perform. When you stop trying to be the perfect older partner, or the endlessly impressive younger partner, you finally make room for something much stronger. Trust. Not the kind built on promises, the kind built on consistency, on small moments, on choosing each other again after ordinary days, not just exciting ones. Because in the end, the biggest challenge isn't convincing the world that your relationship makes sense. It's making sure that, over time, you don't lose yourselves while trying to prove that it does. And that leads to one final truth. A truth that quietly determines whether an age gap relationship becomes a lifelong source of strength or a slow lesson in pretending. The relationships that last are rarely the ones that look the most impressive from the outside. They're usually the ones where two people stop trying to win the same argument over and over again. The argument that sounds like this: Am I enough? It's such a quiet question. You may never say it aloud. Instead, it hides inside everyday moments. You apologize too quickly. You over-explain a decision. You hesitate before sharing a dream because you're afraid it will sound unrealistic. Or you hold back your worries because you don't want to become too much. The age gap didn't create those habits. It simply gave them a place to appear. That's why some couples with 20 years between them feel remarkably secure, while others with only a few years struggle to trust each other. The difference often isn't the calendar. It's whether they learn to stop measuring their worth against imagined expectations. I've noticed something after years of watching people fall in love. The happiest couples don't spend much time asking, "Who should we be?" They spend more time asking, "How can we understand each other better today?" It's a small shift, but it changes everything. Because understanding doesn't freeze people in place, it gives them room to evolve. There will be days when one of you feels stronger, days when the other needs reassurance, moments when your experiences complement each other beautifully, and moments when they clash. None of that automatically predicts the future. It simply means you're two human beings with different histories trying to build one shared story. That's never effortless, but it can be deeply meaningful. One evening, years from now, you may find yourselves sitting together in complete silence. No dramatic conversation, no grand gesture, just 2 cups of coffee growing cold. One of you looks over. The other smiles without saying a word. In that ordinary moment, you won't be thinking about birthdays. You won't be counting years. You'll be remembering thousands of tiny decisions. The choice to ask instead of assume. The choice to listen instead of defend. The choice to stay curious when fear wanted certainty. Those choices are quiet, almost invisible, yet they become the foundation everyone else mistakes for luck. Maybe that's the biggest misunderstanding about age gap love. People often assume the challenge is convincing others to accept it. In many cases, the real challenge is refusing to let fear quietly rewrite a relationship that already has honesty, respect, and genuine care. Not every age gap relationship will last, just as not every relationship between people the same age will. Love has never followed a simple formula. It asks for presence, patience, the courage to see another person as they are, not as your fears imagine they'll become. So if you're standing at the beginning of a relationship like this, or you're already deep inside one, don't rush to answer the question everyone else keeps asking. Will this work? There may be a better question. Can we keep choosing honesty over assumption, curiosity over pride, and connection over appearances? If the answer to that grows stronger with time, the number between your birthdays may become one of the least interesting things about your relationship. And perhaps that's when you realize something unexpected. The strongest love isn't the one that avoids challenges. It's the one that quietly transforms the people willing to face them, together.